Okay, tonight is Matthew chapter 14.
At that time Herod the Tetrarch heard of the fame of Jesus, and said unto his servants, This is John the Baptist. He is risen from the dead, and therefore mighty works do show forth themselves in him. For Herod had laid hold on John, and bound him, and put him in prison for Herodias' sake, his brother Philip's wife. For John said unto him, It is not lawful for thee to have her.
All right, so we have a new scene that we're going to be seeing now. It's referencing someone named Herod. It's referred to him as Herod the Tetrarch. Okay, now a tetrarch is kind of like a monarch, but it's a tetrarch. Okay, and if you know what the prefix MON is usually like a one or a single kind of thing, right? Like a monologue, right? So a monarch would be someone who's like the sole leader over, it's like a king, right? The sole leader of a country or a city or whatever. So he would be a king. Whereas a tetrarch, see the prefix TETR is usually means four. Right, so it's therefore this particular kingdom was divided into four parts, of which there was a leader over each part, and so Herod was one of the four. He had one of the four areas, so therefore he is a tetrarch. So Herod has heard of the fame of Jesus, as you see, all right, and the chapter before, we had read about Jesus telling parables to a lot of the people, and of course other chapters he's doing different miracles. So the word's getting around about this guy. Right? So Herod has heard of that, and so his initial reaction, as you see in the second verse, it says, "Hey, this is John the Baptist who come back from the dead to haunt us to do these things." All right, and that's why he said, "Therefore, mighty works show forth themselves in him." Now, I suspect after having written that, the writer here, Matthew, probably is almost thinking he should put in a little note saying, now maybe you're wondering why I'm saying that it was John the Baptist risen from the dead, because the last time we heard about John the Baptist, he was not dead. So let me tell you the story now of why Herod is saying that it's John the Baptist risen from the dead. How did he get to be dead? Right? And so this next part is going to tell you that story. So it's almost like a little parenthetical story to explain why Herod is saying it's John the Baptist risen from the dead. Okay, and so now it begins in verse 3. It says, "For Herod had laid hold on John and bound him." In other words, he arrested him, right, and put him in prison. He says, but because of Herodias. Now Herodias is even though Herod is in the name, that's a coincidence, okay? But Herodias was his sister-in-law. Okay, it was his brother's wife, and so Herod decided that he thought it would be better for her to be his wife than to be his brother's wife. So basically he took her away from him, okay? And I don't know if there's any wife business involved, but basically he took her to be his own woman, right? And so he was king, he can get away with this stuff, I guess, right? And so, except the John the Baptist, his personality was not such to let these kind of things go unaddressed. So he called out the king on it, and he said, this was wrong, what you did, and probably went around telling people in the city, this is wrong, right? I mean, the king took his own brother's wife away from him and is using her as his own wife, and this king is immoral, and it's inappropriate, and there were even laws regarding things like adultery and so forth, so it was even against their law of the land at the time, all right? But he's the king, so he can get away with this kind of stuff. So you can almost picture it like today. If people think the government leaders doing something wrong, maybe they protest, or they say, oh, that's wrong, whatever. So this was John the Baptist saying the king is wrong about this. He's taken his brother's wife. So that's why John said it's not lawful for thee to have her. All right. So that was what he was telling them. So finally, to end this protest, he had John arrested and put in the dungeon. Right? This way there's no more protesting or telling people that the king was committing an unlawful act.
And when he would have put him to death, he feared the multitude, because they counted him as a prophet. But when Herod's birthday was kept, the daughter of Herodias danced before them and pleased Herod, whereupon he promised with an oath to give her whatsoever she would ask. And she, being before instructed of her mother, said, Give me here John Baptist's head in a charger.
So, the king may have, originally thought, gee, it would be convenient to just execute this guy. This way he's out of my life, and and don't have to worry about him telling people that I'm doing wrong, right? But as you see, it says, well, wait a minute, now the people consider him a prophet, all right? So I'm going to be in even more trouble. I mean, never mind that I'm sleeping with my brother's wife. Now I killed their prophet here. I'm going to be really unpopular. So you think maybe that's not such a good idea. So he's probably going back and forth, saying, let's just leave him in the dungeon for now. We'll think about it another day. It's my birthday, so let me just celebrate my birthday. I'm not going to think too hard on my birthday, all right? And so you see what happens here on his birthday. It says that the daughter of Herodias, so is. I don't think he's even married to her, but if he was, it would be, I guess, his stepdaughter. But basically, the woman's daughter comes in and dances for him, and you would assume it was some kind of usually when you see it depicted in a movie, it's like an erotic kind of a dance, where he's like, sitting there with his tongue hanging out as he's watching her dance. And so when she's done, it says it pleased him, so he said, to show how much he was impressed. He said, I'll give you anything you want. I'll give you anything you want. This guy promises the king, anything you want, you can have it. So she could have asked for half his money. She could have asked to whatever, right? Could have asked for a palace, and anything you want, I'll give to you, right? And so you see what she asked for. She says, well, what I want is John the Baptist's head on a plate. Right, that was what she asked for, right? And of course, it said her mother, told her, I guess, that it would probably go this way, and so she said that this is what you're going to ask for. Of course, the mother wants him killed also because it's making her look bad. That he's telling everybody that it's an unlawful situation. So, by the way, that's what a charger is like a large plate. Okay. See, it's not what you use with your cell phone, right? But so anything that she could have had. That's what she said. Give me John the Baptist's head on a plate. Okay, so this is what's been presented to the king now. Now he has to react to that.
And the king was sorry, nevertheless, for the oath's sake, and them which sat with him at meat, he commanded it to be given her. And he sent and beheaded John in the prison. And his head was brought in a charger and given to the damsel, and she brought it to her mother. And his disciples came and took up the body and buried it, and went and told Jesus.
This is what happens when you give your word on something without any bounds, all right? So he's going to say anything you want. So he made this promise in front of everybody who was there, and so now he's in a tough spot. He says that the king was sorry he had allowed himself to be manipulated in this way, but nonetheless, now that's where he was. He had made a promise for everybody that whatever she asked for, she would get, and this was within his power to deliver it. So therefore, it says he followed through on it. And he told them, well, cut his head off and bring it to her on a plate. And so that's what they did, right? It says his head was brought in a charger, given to her. She gave it to her mother, right? And again, why they thought that was a nice gift, or kind of gross, really. But but still, you can almost picture. I mean, the king, like I said, was manipulated here, and so. He obviously really what she wanted was just for him to be executed, but I'm sure he said, okay, you want the head? Here you go, have the head, blood and all, so he brought the head on a plate, here you go, that's what you asked for, and so that's what you got, and so they gave the head, and then it says, the body was then buried, and so that's how John the Baptist died, right? He was beheaded in prison because this girl and her mother manipulated the king into executing him. After the disciples of John came and buried the body, then they told Jesus what happened. So this way, then Jesus knew that his friend John, actually I guess it would have been his cousin John, had died because the king had killed him. So now you can go back to the beginning of the chapter here, where it says that so now picture the days after this, all right? That now Jesus is gaining fame. And the king is probably worried. Oh no, is John the Baptist has come back from the dead to haunt me, right? And so he's coming back from the dead, and that's who this is, and that's why he's got all his power. That's why all these magical type things are happening. It's John the Baptist back from the dead to take vengeance on me. Okay, so that's why he's getting all worried, because he was feeling guilty over having been the one to have done this.
When Jesus heard of it, he departed thence by ship into a desert place apart. And when the people had heard thereof, they followed him on foot out of the cities. And Jesus went forth and saw a great multitude, and was moved with compassion toward them, and he healed their sick. And when it was evening, his disciples came to him, saying, This is a desert place, and the time is now past. Send the multitude away, that they may go into the villages and buy themselves victuals. But Jesus said unto them, They need not depart. Give ye them to eat.
All right, so it's now telling you it's a continuation of the story. All right, in 13 it says when Jesus heard of it, in other words, the death of John the Baptist, it says he departed by ship into a desert. All right, so you would assume he preferred to is not spend some time alone to kind of grieve a little bit and mourn and reflect on what had happened. All right, so he was going to go kind of off by himself for a little bit, but in this case he wasn't being left alone. As you can see, it says the people heard what was happening. They followed him on foot out of the cities. All right, so imagine you go off on a ship to be by yourself, and then there comes all these people coming out of the city to come and find you. All right, so there's no rest for the weary, or no chance to spend time alone. All right, because everybody wants to come and see him. All right, and so when Jesus saw that in 14, it says he saw the great multitude. So he wasn't mad or put off by it, or rather it says he was moved with compassion that they wanted to be around him. So that's why he said he healed their sick, right? And so he was doing whatever he could for them to make it a blessing and a good thing for them to be there, right? So that's again, rather than being put out, that his peaceful time is being disturbed, instead he's healing their sick and having compassion on them. And then further, as you see in 15 and 16. All right, as it gets toward evening, he says, all these people have been here all day. They really should have something to eat, right? They surely have something to eat. So that's why he said, he says, this is a desert place. Time's now past. The disciples said that we should probably send them home to give them something. They can get something to eat. So as you see in 16, Jesus says they don't have to leave. Give them something to eat right now. Right? Give them to eat right here. Okay? So you can see that Jesus is setting a good example in that. Again, he's not put out by the fact that they were disturbing, they were potentially disturbing him, right? Because he went there to be alone after the death of his close friend, and then here all the people came. But instead of being annoyed at them, instead he heals their sick, and then says, well, they don't have to go back to eat. We can feed them right here.
And they say unto him, We have here but 5 loaves and 2 fishes. He said, Bring them hither to me. And he commanded the multitude to sit down on the grass, and took the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes, and looking up to heaven, he blessed and brake, and gave the loaves to his disciples, and the disciples to the multitude. And they did all eat, and were filled, and they took up of the fragments that remained 12 baskets full. And they that had eaten were about 5,000 men, beside women and children.
As you might expect, even if you hadn't heard this story already, you might wonder, they just were kind of wandered almost aimlessly out into a desert area, and they were sitting around. And so if there were really 5,000 people there, or in fact 5,000 men plus their families, it's most likely not going to be enough food just laying around to give them, right? And in fact, when they took a little inventory, as you can see, it says we have 5 loaves and 2 fishes, right? So that's what we have to feed 5,000 plus people. All right, so Jesus says, bring them here, and let's get started with this. And the disciples sort of like, what are you talking about? What are you going to do with these 5 loaves and 2 fishes? It'd be enough for us to eat. It's certainly not going to be enough for all of them. All right, but Jesus says he commanded the multitude to sit down on the grass. Let's be orderly here. Everybody sit and be neat about it. And families together, right? And it says, he took the 5 loaves and 2 fishes, and he blessed them and broke them and gave them to the disciples. Okay, here you go, give them out. So they started giving them out, and this one, and this one, and there's still more, and they just kept going, and before they knew it, they give it to everybody. And then at the end, they said, well, we don't want to waste any, so let's go ahead and gather up what's left. It says, and when they did, in 20, it says, everybody was full. They took up of the fragments that remained 12 baskets full. So they had 12 baskets of stuff left at the end, which obviously was even more than what they started with. So clearly it was a miracle right in front of their eyes, right? That they started with a small amount of food that would be nowhere near enough to feed that many people. They fed everybody and had more left than what they started with. Okay? So of course, Jesus knew what he was going to do, and so that's why the disciples might have been confused, but he knew what he was going to do, and he knew that we could feed the people, and that's why he said, "Come sit down, and we'll take care of people. They don't have to go back to the village; they can be fed right here." And as you hear that kind of a story, I mean, there's a couple of things you can say about that. I mean, in one way, it's kind of like I would say the love of God or the Spirit of God. That you can give it out to people, and that doesn't mean that you have any less. In fact, really, if anything, you have more when you're done than what you started with. All right, because you can share that with people, and there's an unlimited amount of that to go around. All right, so you could look at it that way. Right, but even from the standpoint of the actual eating of the food, we've heard stories in the church of similar type testimonies. Right, I mean, not to this magnitude necessarily, but still where there was not enough maybe to feed who was there, and yet it worked out. So so you can see that it's not impossible for the Lord to do that kind of thing, and so this was one example of what He did there. And like I said, we've had other instances where something similar had happened. Okay, so that's the story of the feeding of the 5,000. All right, and as we said, really it's even more than 5,000 because it points out in 21 it says that they had eaten were 5,000 men besides the women and children. All right, see the women and children don't count when you're counting. All right, so it's just it's 5,000 men, or so basically it would be like 5,000 families really. All right, so you figure if. I mean, not every single one had a family, but if they were, it would be then 5,000 women plus however many children they had. So really, it could have been more like 20,000 people instead of 5,000 people.
And straightway Jesus constrained his disciples to get into a ship and to go before him unto the other side, while he sent the multitudes away. And when he had sent the multitudes away, he went up into a mountain apart to pray. And when the evening was come, he was there alone. But the ship was now in the midst of the sea, tossed with waves, for the wind was contrary.
So this is all happening, the same day, if you will, right? So the same day that Jesus was notified of the death of John the Baptist was he went off and fed 5,000 people, and and now the day is ending. Okay, so you see in 22 it says that Jesus told his disciples, why don't you go and I'll send everybody home, all right? So he says he constrained, or he kind of convinced his disciples to get into a ship and to go before him. You go ahead and you get over back to our home, and I'll join you later. Let me send everybody home. And so that's what he's doing. He says he sent the multitudes away, and now finally he's alone, right? So this was what he wanted in the first place, really, was to get some alone time. So this way he sent the disciples away, he sent the multitudes home, right? And they were all fed and filled, so they didn't have to worry about eating now, so they all went home, right? And so now he's spending some time praying, and so you can assume that his prayer would be partly as he's thinking about John the Baptist's death. So he's praying for those who would mourn his loss, and for comfort and peace and so forth. Right, and so this is, you would assume that this is what he would be praying for, because that's what he went there for in the first place, was to spend some time alone. So it says, but by the time the evening has come now, so he's there by himself now, right? So everybody's gone home, and the disciples are on the ship. But unfortunately, as this is in 24, it says the ship is now in the midst of the sea, tossed with waves, for the wind was contrary. So whether he was able to see that from where he was, or just knew that that's what was going on, but they were. Let's say halfway across the water on the way back to their hometown, but they couldn't get across because the wind was contrary. So there was a storm, there was waves and so forth, and the ship is being rocked all around, and so they're having a time of it even just keeping the ship moving in the right direction. So that's where everybody is now. The multitude's gone home. Jesus is over here by himself, and his disciples are stuck on the ship in the middle of a storm.
And in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went unto them walking on the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, It is a spirit. And they cried out for fear. But straightway Jesus spake unto them, saying, Be of good cheer, it is I, be not afraid.
It's nighttime, right, as we already said. And it says, now Jesus went unto them, the disciples, walking on top of the water, right, walking on top of the sea. And so it says the disciples now see him walking on the sea. And if you don't necessarily know all the parameters of the story, maybe you just thought, isn't that cool? Here comes Jesus walking across the water, right? But again, remember what's going on, right? It's dark. There's a storm going on, so there's wind blowing, and the ship is rocking back and forth. They're afraid the ship could even go over. They're trying to do their best to keep the ship moving. And now, in the midst of the rain and the wind, whatever, they see some kind of a figure walking across the water. So their first reaction is, ah! Right? Maybe it's the death angels coming or something, right? To come and claim us all, right? So it's needless to say they're afraid. Right, it says they were troubled, saying it's a spirit, and they cried out for fear, as I just did, or as I just demonstrated. Right, so they said it's some kind of a spirit. I mean, it's coming to get us. It's coming to claim us here. It means we're going to die, and this spirit's going to come and grab us and drag us down to Davy Jones's locker or something. Okay, right. So, but instead, it says Jesus, seeing this, he tells them, "Be of good cheer. It's me. Don't be afraid." All right. So I'm saying, "Be of good cheer," though. Well, be of good cheer. Here I am. All right. But the way we usually like to tell the story is that even in the midst of trouble, in the midst of a storm of life, that if the Lord is there, you can picture him saying, "Be of good cheer. I'm here." All right. You don't have to be afraid. You don't have to be discouraged. You don't have to be disheartened because the Lord is here, right? So Jesus is there coming to them in the midst of the storm. Right? Of course, the fact he's walking across the top of the water is because he can, right? And so therefore he's walking them that way because he was left alone. He didn't have a ship, so he's walking to them across the top of the water.
And Peter answered him and said, Lord, if it be thou, bid me come unto thee on the water. And he said, Come. And when Peter was come down out of the ship, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. But when he saw the wind boisterous, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried, saying, Lord, save me. And immediately Jesus stretched forth his hand and caught him, and said unto him, O thou of little faith, wherefore didst thou doubt?
All right, so in hearing the voice of Jesus, from this scary-looking spirit walking across the top of the water, so Peter says, hey, if it's you, then you should be able to tell me to walk across the water, and I can walk on top of the water too. It was kind of a quick comeback, I would think, a quick response to say, well, if you're the Lord and you're doing this, well, then you could help me do it too. So Jesus says, come on, all right? And so it says that Peter came down out of the ship and walked on the water to go to Jesus. Now, see, again, I like us to appreciate the scene here, okay? Again, it's still in the midst of a storm or whatever. So now here's Peter is yelled out to Jesus. Jesus says, come on. So Peter's now climbing over the side of the ship, and I'm sure they're all watching, like, is this really gonna happen? What's gonna happen when he gets down there? Is he gonna sink or what? And so they're all watching, and he goes down in the water, and I'm sure he's like, okay, and sure enough, all right, it holds him up, all right, and he's able to stand on top of the water, and this is really cool, all right, this is really exciting. So that's what he did. He says he walked on the water to go to Jesus. So he actually started walking across the water. Now again, if it was you or me, you'd be like, okay, you probably wouldn't want to get too far from the boat too quick, and you'd be like taking it. Is this really gonna work? Is it really gonna hold me? All right, but yet, he's walking toward Jesus, all right, to go across the water. And before I do the next part, I would point out, a few years ago we did a sermon here, right, where we talked about, we likened the idea of walking on the water to doing amazing things for the Lord, right, with the Lord's strength. That if the Lord is with us, we can do amazing things, right? We've seen miracles, we've seen great things happen, and so it's all with the help of God, all right? All right, but the title of it was, well, if you want to walk on the water, you need to get out of the boat, all right? Was the title, all right? And that's the idea, is that while we stay safe in the boat, right, then you can't do the amazing things. You got to kind of put yourself out there and put yourself maybe even a little at risk to be in the Lord's hands, and then you see amazing things happen. So that's kind of what happened here. The other disciples just got to be spectators, but Peter was the one that actually got to do it, right? Because he had enough, I'll say, nerve to get out of the boat and actually step on the water and say, is this gonna happen? And so he gave Jesus the chance to work through him and make something miraculous happen, and he actually walked across the water toward him. Okay? So having done that, all right, but see, of course, Peter is human and didn't have the Holy Ghost yet, so he took a few steps, and as you can see, it says But when he saw the wind boisterous, he was afraid, right? So after a few steps, he's probably looking around saying, I can't do this. I can't do this. What am I doing here, right? Here comes the wind and whatever, and what's going to happen now? So as soon as that happens, he starts to sink, right? He starts to sink then because now his fear has overcome his faith, right? And so now it says he starts to sink, right? As you can see, it says, beginning to sink, he cried, saying, Lord, save me, right? And it says immediately Jesus catches him, but then says, oh, thou of little faith, wherefore didst thou doubt? Right? You were doing it. You were doing it. So why did you doubt? Why did you think you couldn't do it? You were already doing it. So that's why he says, oh, thou of little faith, because faith. Faith, of course, is believing in something that you can't see. But here in this case, he had overcome that at the beginning to get out there and actually take some steps. Right? And then in the middle of doing it, then he, I guess, decided, I can't do this. Right? So that's why he says, thou of little faith, why'd you doubt? You were doing it. And but yet, of course, still Jesus rescued him as he would rescue any of us. Right? If we step out on faith, and then even if our faith wavers, the Lord's still there to pick us up and basically correct us and say, then let's try it again some other time, right? Try it again the next opportunity you have to exercise your faith.
And when they were come into the ship, the wind ceased. Then they that were in the ship came and worshipped him, saying, Of a truth, thou art the Son of God.
So after Jesus kind of rescues Peter from this, and so you can kind of picture me probably holding him up at this point and saying, come on, let's get back in the ship, or let's get in the ship. And so the two of them join the rest of them in the ship, and as soon as they're in the ship, the storm's over, right? The storm's over. The wind ceased, and the waves stopped, and the ship settles in, and so now it's just a calm ride. And as soon as Jesus got on board, the storm was over, right? Which again, you can relate that to the storms of life. When Jesus gets on board, the storm is over, right? Because the Lord helps you through the storm, right? And so upon seeing this, of course, seeing the whole bit with him walking across, with him having Peter walk on the water and helping him in the ship, and then he gets on, and the whole storm is over. So you can see their reaction. It says they that were in the ship worshipped him, saying, Of a truth, thou art the Son of God, right? Because who else could have done this? Who else could have accomplished this? So we witnessed it with our own eyes. We saw all this happen, and again, hopefully we would feel the same way if we were privileged enough to witness something like that, all right? To see the Lord walking across the water, to see the storm cease as soon as he steps into the boat, all right? So there was visual evidence. That his disciples were able to build their faith a little bit in who he was because they witnessed this particular miracle. We read in the Gospel of John, we read a similar account of this, all right? And you may remember I said, do you notice a detail here that's not in the other story, all right? Because the Matthew one is the one we usually use when we tell the story of Jesus walking on the water, right? Because the John one is not as detailed as this, right? But there was something at the end of the Gospel of John version that's not here. At the end of this, right, it says that Jesus was back in the ship and the wind ceased. It says that they were immediately on the other side. All right, they were immediately on the other side, right? So in other words, they didn't have to make the rest of the voyage over. He stepped in, and suddenly the boat was at the shore, right? So they were there immediately, and so that was yet another miracle that occurred, right? Is that they didn't have to finish the voyage; they were there just right away.
And when they were gone over, they came into the land of Gennesaret. And when the men of that place had knowledge of him, they sent out into all that country round about, and brought unto him all that were diseased, and besought him that they might only touch the hem of his garment, and as many as touched were made perfectly whole.
When they were at the other side, it says now they kind of continuing their work. You would assume maybe this is the next day or maybe some days after that. All right, it says they came to the land of Gennesaret. It says when the men of that place, knew that he was there, they said, anybody who's sick, come and see Jesus. Right, he can heal you. And in fact, as you see in 36, it says, just touch the hem of his garment, and you'll be made whole. And in fact, it says as many as touched were made perfectly whole. Now, where would they have gotten the idea that touching the hem of his garment could do something? Remember, there was the woman with the issue of blood, all right, for 12 years, and that then on the day that Jesus was walking to the home of Jairus, here she kind of joined the crowd, and she was down on the ground and just said, if I could just touch the hem of his garment, I'll be made whole. And as soon as she did, remember that Jesus said, hey, who touched me? All right, and the disciples said, what are you talking about, who touched you? Everybody's touching you, right? Everybody's bumping into you. But he said, no, I felt virtue go out of me, because he knew that she had faith enough to say, if I touch the hem of his garment, I'll be made whole. And so sure enough, he turned and he saw her, and she was healed. Right? So the people who were around witnessed that. His disciples saw it. And so here they're telling people, you don't got to touch the hem of his garment, okay? He's got a magic garment apparently, or he's got, if you even have that much faith that you can touch his garment, you can be made whole. And that's of course what does it. It wasn't a magic cloth, and it was anything like that. It was something that if you had the faith that this was Jesus, this was the Son of God, that then you could be made whole. And so sure enough, that's what they did. Now I would add to that the primary purpose of Jesus being there was, of course, to deliver the message of salvation, right? So, I mean, he was happy to heal people, as you saw earlier in the chapter, and he had compassion on them, he healed them. But I mean, that was not his primary purpose, right? The primary purpose wasn't to heal the body, it's to heal the soul. But yet, when people find out that he can do these things, it's like, well, hey, be like some super surgeon today or something that everybody recommends him. Hey, go see that guy, and you'll get better, right? And so basically, he's spending all of his time healing people, which was not the number one priority. Number one priority was to give the message of salvation. So I mentioned that because you see here that at the end of the chapter, I mean, in essence, the word is getting out anyway. This is what he can do, right? So you can see, it says, when the men of that place had knowledge of him, they sent him out the country round about and brought all that were diseased. Come on, all you sick people, come on, this guy can make you better, right? And which he did, right? He did, and presumably they were given the opportunity to share the message of salvation with the people, but it doesn't say that here in this, because that was the primary purpose of Jesus being there, was to show people how they can save their soul, not how they can get healed in their body and maybe live a few extra years, but rather how they can save their soul and live for eternity. So here, in this particular case, though, he did heal the people, and he's had that faith, they were healed, and so whatever happened to them after that, it doesn't say here, but hopefully some took advantage of salvation also, because that's the real gift of God.